In this lab, we'll go even deeper and dive into Windows user permissions. We will learn how to assign and modify user permissions to control access to files and folders on the Windows operating system. Let's jump in. Let's open up our File Explorer now, and we're going to navigate to the Windows PowerShell folder inside of Documents. From here, right-click the folder and then select Properties, and then navigate to the Security tab. On the top portion, we'll be able to see all the groups and usernames that have specific permissions set for this folder. If we go ahead and select any of them, we'll then see on the bottom portion there's specific actual permissions for this folder. If we want to change any of the permissions for these users or groups, we select the Edit button, and then inside of here we can go and select Allow or Deny for individual specific permissions for each individual user or group that has a permission set for this folder. If we want to add a new user or group with permissions for this folder, we can then select the Add button. Searching for object names is the same thing like when we worked in the previous lab, trying to add Testy McTestface to the administrators group. In this case, let's try adding the guest object. And this is a common user account in Windows operating systems that are left on by default. And now we can see that guest is a specific user that has permissions for this folder. We can allow, we can deny individual permissions now for any guest account to access the Windows PowerShell folder inside of Documents. Feel free to go in and allow and deny and apply as you would like, just to gain some exposure to how the permissions work. We're going to go ahead and remove the guest user from this folder in a moment anyway. Once we hit OK, the guest user will have their permissions applied to the user that we specified. If we want to remove them, we can select Edit, select the guest account, and then go ahead and select the Remove button to remove them from the permissions of this folder. Don't hit OK or Apply though, that's just for demonstration purposes. Let's go ahead and select the Cancel button, just so that we can mess around with the guest user permissions a little bit more. And that probably seems pretty tedious, right? Well, at least there's another way to do this, and we can actually inherit permissions by selecting the Advanced button just on the bottom portion of this Security tab. Inside of this Advanced Sharing panel, we can apply Inheritance, and this means that our folder can inherit all of the permissions from the parent folder. And now this is a bit of a blessing and a curse, because if you set the permissions incorrectly from the top level, several layers up, and all of your folders below that also inherited the permissions, you could end up in a position where a user has access to a lot of things that they shouldn't. But if you do it right, then you're going to save yourself a lot of time. And so permissions in the GUI really don't get much more complicated than that. Let's hop in the command line now to compare how we would do very similar permission granting and settings, but using command line tools instead. First, we'll run the cd command to change our directory to Documents so we can access the Windows PowerShell folder. And then we're going to run the command called icackles, which is kind of a funny name, but it actually stands for Integrity Control Access Control List, which is a little bit lengthy, so icackles is a little bit easier to say. And it's used to manage access control lists, or ACLs. And then in order to use it, we just need to specify the folder, followed by an option of grant, deny, or remove, and then the username, and then some specific file permission modes. So we could do a /grant on the guest user, and then we need to follow it up with a colon, and then put read in brackets. And this would give read permissions to the Windows PowerShell folder. Now let's go ahead and check that inside of the GUI, right-click the folder, go to Properties, go to Security, and we can see that the guest object over here actually has read permissions. Cool. Okay, so if we wanted to now go back on the command line and perform a little bit more permissions management, we could run the same command again, but we could instead do a deny. So if we did a /deny guest read access, we're actually going to deny the read access. And instead of individual permission modes like read and write and such, we can do another mode of F, and this is full. So this means deny full permissions. And if we did grant, it would give them full permissions with the F. And then finally, we can just remove the account entirely from the permission set. If we did a /remove on guest, this would now entirely remove the guest object. So let's go inside the GUI, check Properties, go to Security, the folder, and you can see guest is entirely missing at this point now. Awesome, and as you can see, it doesn't really get much more complicated than this. You just pick a folder, set the permissions as you need, and you can do it equally on the GUI or the command line. And this is one of those times with Windows where you can see on the GUI, it's probably a little bit easier to do that en masse.